In this lesson, I'll be giving a tour around the Arduino Uno. The Arduino Uno that you have might look slightly different. There might be a different logo right around here, but essentially the function is the same. Right now, I'm going to change this line so I can. So you might find it different around here, but it's the same thing. I'm going to start with the lower right-hand corner, which is down around here. This strip here is the power strip. I'm afraid you can't see the text too well, but these two holes here are for the ground pins. So when you want to hook up something that requires a connection, oftentimes it'll need a ground. There are two grounds here. There's another one someplace else. I'll show you later. This hole here is for V in, and this would be if you want to power the Arduino with an external source that isn't the 5 volts coming in from the USB port. Over here, this is the 5 volts. This is not where you power the Arduino, but is where you can get power. Some things need 5 volts, and you can put a plug in there. Over here, these are the analog connection here with A0, A1, A2, and A3. There's also an A4 and an A5, but don't use those because those are shared with the I2C bus, and I'll be showing you that it's much more effective to have that free and do things with the I2C bus than there. Close to this analog connector are a series of other connectors that are tied into it. And these, you see here it says A0. These three are, the data point for A0 is right here. These are pin connections, not holes. And this one here is 5 volts, and this here is ground. So you see this brings out a lot more grounds and a lot more 5 volt connections. And these here are the A0, A1, A2, and A3 pins. So depending on how you're trying to connect up, if you need pins, you go here. If you need holes, you go here. And if you need more voltage connections, you go here, and more grounds connections, you go here. Okay, so let's keep going around the board. This is the jack, the power jack, and it's like V-in, where you can bring in voltage from some power supply or a battery pack. It takes a jack that looks like this. The power is on a pin that's inside, and this is the ground around the outside, and it plugs in right into here on this jack here. Going up here, this is a switch. You generally want to leave it at 5 volts, which is the switch is on this side. 3.3 or 3V3 voltage would be if you have special sensors that don't want to have 5 volts. Over here is the USB jack, and here is the USB plug that plugs into it. I'm sure you're familiar with this already. Here's another connector. Don't use this. I won't describe it. Over here are the digital pins, but not all of them. These here, this one here is ground, and then these are various, this one is AREF, analog ref. You use that for more accurate measurements of voltage coming in. These two pins here are a duplication of these two pins here, so you don't want to use them either, because those are, again, reserved for the I2C bus. But now this section here are the digital inputs and outputs. Just want to alert you here, you don't want to use these two, because those are digital 0 and 1, and they are used by the USB connection and by the serial monitor. So if you use those for standard input and output on the Uno, it will prevent you from being able to do uploads or being able to use the serial monitor to see values. But you can use all of these here. So this is 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8. And be aware that this gap here is between 8 and 7. Oftentimes I'll direct the first things I use on an Uno to be either 7 or 8 because it's so easy to find those pins. So here's 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. So generally I'll start with either 2 or 7 or 8 or 13 as the one that I'll use. Just a reminder, the 13, which is this pin here, is also connected to the LED that is sort of tucked away, hidden under here because of this label that I put on the Unos. But when you try to set high, digital 13 high, there'll be a little light that shines there, a little LED. These pins, pin 13, 13 to 0, or in where I want you to stop is at 2. These pins are all the same data lines as the 13 down to 2 on here. It's just a straight connection here on the printed circuit board, like that. I've given you a label here that makes it easier to find the connections. These again are pins the way I described down here. The blue pins are ground, the red pins are +5, and the yellow pins are data pins. I've added additional information here, which are the orange dots, and these are the pins that can be used for analog write signals. So that's D3, D5, D6, D9, 10, and 11. So there are 6 pins that can be used to have an analog output as distinguished from a digital output. Over here there's a connector here, and I blocked it out. I don't want you to use that either. This brings out 5 volts and ground, which is fine, but it also brings out 0 and 1, and so it's the same caution that it messes up the USB connection if you use the data pins here. And these here are pins 0 and 1, the connectors here. So it's best not to use these as well. This connector, don't use this either. This one is used for downloading new bootloaders to the Arduino and various other things. It is an SPI interface, and there will be some boards that use it and some sensors that use it, but try to avoid them and use I2C instead. Now, speaking of I2C, when I said don't use these, this is the connector for the I2C bus, and the top pin here is ground, and then it's +5, and then it's SDA or data, and SCL, which is clock. And I've created custom cables that have special coloring on the connectors, so you'll find connectors that work with 4 pins that have a green, red, yellow, and blue, and use these for the connections for something like the real-time clock or the LCD display. On the subject of connectors, you'll also find 3-pin connectors that are yellow, red, and blue, and I use these colors so that you are reminded to plug them directly into here. So these have holes, and over here they're pins, and it mates quite nicely. It makes it very easy to connect things up onto the Uno. And I believe that's it. I don't think I've missed anything. Oh yes, here's a reset button down here. If you have a program that hangs up or you just want to restart it for some reason, push that pin down right there. It's a little awkward because this connector is so tight up against it, but this is where you need to find the reset button. And that concludes this lesson.